The Vraxian Empire conquered 1,000 worlds with absolute impunity, believing they understood the universe's rules. They thought taking the last pure-born human child from an irradiated sanctuary was a strategic masterpiece. They didn't realize they had just activated a dead man's switch forged by a species that weaponized spite. The breach occurred at 0400 hours, Pacific Standard Time, deep beneath the granite shell of Cheyenne Mountain. In a subterranean facility built off the books by DARPA and the remnants of the United Nations, the air grew freezing cold. The base was supposed to be impenetrable, shielded by electromagnetic dampeners and miles of solid rock. But the Vraxian vanguard did not use conventional doors. They used dimensional phase shifters, bleeding through the very fabric of reality to step directly into Sector 4. They were tall, obsidian-scaled bipeds, clad in crystalline armor that absorbed the kinetic rounds of the base's automated defense turrets as if they were raindrops. They moved with terrifying efficiency, killing the 22 human guards in the sector in less than 14 seconds. They did not linger to revel in the slaughter. They had one target. Her name was Abigail. She was 6 years old. In a world ravaged by the catastrophic genetic degradation of the 2084 orbital wars, Abigail was the anomaly. Her DNA was pristine, untouched by the synthetic plagues and radiation sickness that had rendered 99% of the surviving human population sterile. To humanity, she was the cure. To the Vraxian Empire, who monitored Earth as a quarantined curiosity, she was a biological asset of unparalleled value, a master key to unlocking rapid cellular regeneration. Sub-Commander Kael Thar of the Vraxian Strike Team scooped the sleeping child from her stasis crib. He activated his wrist console, dropping a small, pulsating holographic emitter on the floor, a calling card, a statement of absolute dominance. Then, in a flash of violet light, they were gone. 3 minutes later, General Matthew Donovan walked into the nursery. The smoke from the melted automated turrets was still clinging to the ceiling. The bodies of his elite guards were scattered across the floor, their armor sliced clean through by plasma edges. Donovan did not weep. He did not fall to his knees. The era of human grief had burned away a long time ago, replaced by a cold, mathematical pragmatism. He stepped over the bodies and picked up the Vraxian holographic emitter. It flared to life, projecting the sneering reptilian face of a Vraxian warlord. "People of Earth," the alien voice hissed, translated through a crude neural linguistic algorithm. "Your genetic savior is now property of the Vraxian ascendancy. Do not attempt pursuit. Do not attempt negotiation. You are a dying, fractured species clinging to a ruined rock. Accept your extinction with dignity. If a single human vessel leaves your atmosphere, we will vaporize your atmosphere." The message looped. Donovan crushed the emitter beneath his combat boot. He tapped his earpiece, connecting directly to the Global Defense Coalition in Geneva. Director Jonathan Hayes answered almost immediately. "General Donovan," Hayes said, his voice stripped of all emotion. "Sensors indicate a localized spatial rupture in Cheyenne. We have lost telemetry on the asset." "The asset is gone, Jonathan," Donovan replied, his voice barely more than a whisper. Vraxian Strike Team. They phased through the mountain, took Abigail, and left a threat of planetary annihilation if we pursue. There was a pause on the line. It was not a pause of despair. It was the silence of a heavy, iron door swinging shut. "The Vraxians," Hayes said slowly. "They believe we are the same broken refugees they observed during the resource wars." "They do," Donovan confirmed. They think we are hiding in the dark because we are afraid of the predators. Understood, Hayes said. Authorize the lifting of the Geneva Concordat. Contact the black sites. Lockheed, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. Tell them the leash is off. And the fleet? Donovan asked. Activate the Leviathans, Hayes ordered. Execute the Oppenheimer Protocol. Let them see what we built in the dark. For 60 years, humanity had played the part of the dying victim. After the near apocalypse of 2084, when humanity nearly bombed itself out of existence, the surviving governments realized they were not alone in the universe. Alien probes had watched the Earth burn, recording the devastation with clinical detachment. Realizing they were outgunned by interstellar empires, humanity made a choice. They faked their own death rattle. Publicly, Earth was a wasteland of scavengers. Privately, a shadow economy emerged. Trillions of dollars, siphoned from the remnants of the old world order, were funneled into deep space black projects. The greatest minds of Boeing, SpaceX remnants, and DARPA were sent to hollowed-out asteroids in the Kuiper Belt. They did not build ships for exploration. They did not build ships for trade. They built machines of pure, unadulterated malice. Deep within the ice rings of Saturn, massive hangar doors began to grind open. Stealth plating, designed to absorb all known forms of electromagnetic and tachyon radiation, shed layers of frost. Engines powered by weaponized antimatter singularities flared to life, burning with a violent, silent fury. The Vraxians thought taking the child would break humanity's spirit. They didn't realize that Abigail was the only thing keeping humanity tethered to its morality. She was the anchor, and the Vraxians had just cut the chain. Aboard the Vraxian dreadnought Obsidian Pride, Fleet Admiral Corvan stood on the observation deck, watching the swirling vortex of slip space outside the reinforced transparent aluminum windows. The dreadnought was a masterpiece of alien engineering, a 3-mile-long spear of crystalline metal that moved faster than the speed of light by gracefully folding dimensions. They were already 2 light-years away from the Sol system, deep within the safety of a slip-space corridor. "Status of the specimen?" Corvan asked, not turning his gaze from the swirling cosmic tunnel. Chief Scientist Vorath approached, bowing his head slightly. "The human child is secured in the medical bay, Admiral. Her genetic structure is fascinating. It possesses a latent adaptability that defies our understanding of terrestrial evolution. She will yield decades of medical breakthroughs for the ascendancy." "Did she resist?" "She is a child, Admiral. She is currently sitting on the floor of the containment cell, drawing on a piece of synthesized paper. She appears entirely unaware of the magnitude of her situation." Vorath chuckled, a dry, clicking sound. "Her species is remarkably fragile. It is a wonder they survived their own atomic age." Corvan scoffed. "They are primitives. They play with fire and burn their own house down. How long until we reach the Vraxian core worlds?" "Approximately 72 hours, Admiral. We are completely undetectable while within the slip-space corridor." "Good," Corvan murmured. "Let the humans look up at their empty sky and despair." Down in the medical bay, Abigail sat cross-legged on the cold, sterile floor. The Vraxian guards stood outside her transparent energy cell, watching her with detached amusement. Abigail wasn't crying. She held a black crayon, one she had brought from her room, and was meticulously drawing a picture of a large, jagged shape surrounded by smaller, fiery shapes. One of the guards tapped the glass, trying to startle her. Abigail looked up, her blue eyes devoid of the fear they expected. She stared directly at the guard, blinked once, and went back to drawing. 2 hours and 45 minutes had passed since the abduction. On the bridge of the Obsidian Pride, the ship's central artificial intelligence suddenly emitted a low, dissonant chime. Admiral Corvan frowned, turning to the sensor pit. "Report, Admiral," the sensor officer said, his scales clicking in agitation. "We are detecting a massive gravimetric distortion directly behind us." "Behind us?" Corvan snapped. "Impossible. We are in a slip-space corridor. Nothing can track a vessel through dimensional folding." "It's not tracking us, sir." The officer's voice rose in pitch, betraying a sudden, spiking panic. It is tearing the corridor open." The Vraxians used advanced mathematics and elegant physics to slip between the layers of reality. It was a precise, delicate art. What the sensors were detecting was not delicate. It was the cosmic equivalent of taking a sledgehammer to a pane of glass. "Show me!" Corvan roared. The main holographic display flickered, rendering a visual representation of the slip-space tunnel. Directly aft of the Obsidian Pride, the swirling blue and violet energies of the corridor were turning a violent, sickly red. The fabric of the dimension was literally being shredded apart. Then the anomaly burst through. It was a ship, but it looked nothing like the elegant, aerodynamic vessels of the Galactic community. It was a brutalist nightmare, a jagged, angular monolith of matte black armor that absorbed the light around it. It possessed no grace, no sweeping curves. It was a flying fortress of kinetic weaponry and heavy plating, designed with a single aggressive purpose. And it was not alone. Behind the first dreadnought, a dozen more tore through the breach, their singularity drives screaming as they forced the dimensional tunnel to stay open through sheer, localized gravitational brute force. "Identify those vessels," Corvan yelled, gripping the edge of his command console. "Sir, the metallurgical signatures, the sublight emissions." The sensor officer swallowed hard. "They are human. Sir, they are from Earth." "That is impossible," Corvan bellowed. "Their fastest ships max out at 0.1 C. They don't have slipspace drives. They don't have the shielding to survive dimensional travel." "They aren't using slipspace drives, Admiral," the chief engineer interrupted, his voice trembling. "They are detonating focused antimatter charges in a synchronized sequence to artificially fracture space-time, and then riding the shockwave. It is madness. It is suicidal. The stress on their hulls should have crushed them into subatomic dust." But they were not crushed. The human fleet, the Leviathans, accelerated, easily matching the speed of the Vraxian flagship. "Admiral!" the communications officer shouted over the blaring klaxons. "We are being painted by targeting lasers. Thousands of them." "Sir, they are bypassing our crystalline shielding completely. They are using phased plasma kinetic kill vehicles." "Open a channel," Corvan commanded, trying to project authority over his rising dread. "To the lead human vessel." The screen snapped to black, then resolved into the image of a human standing on a dimly lit command deck. He wore a pitch-black uniform, with no medals, no insignia, save for a small, faded patch of the old United States flag on his shoulder. It was General Matthew Donovan. "Human," Corvan sneered, masking his shock. "You have made a grave error. You have violated Vraxian space. Stand down, or we will vaporize your primitive fleet and then turn our weapons on your home world." Donovan stared into the camera. His face was a mask of cold, terrifying resolve. He didn't look like a man whose species was on the brink of extinction. He looked like an executioner who had just arrived for work. 3 hours ago, Donovan said, his voice echoing through the bridge of the Obsidian Pride, steady and devoid of theatrics. "You entered Cheyenne Mountain. You killed 22 of my men, and you took Abigail. She is property of the Ascendancy now, Corvan replied, lifting his chin. You cannot stop. Shut up and listen, Donovan cut him off. The sheer disrespect in his tone made Corvan flinch. You assumed we were hiding on Earth because we were weak. You analyzed our history. You saw the orbital wars. You saw the nuclear fire. What your analysts failed to understand is that we didn't bomb ourselves because we were primitive. We bombed ourselves because we are apex predators, and we ran out of prey. The human fleet maneuvered, fanning out and surrounding the Obsidian Pride within the slipspace tunnel. For 60 years, Donovan continued, we have been terrified of what we are capable of. We built a cage for ourselves. We disarmed. We put our monsters to sleep. Abigail was the proof that we could be better. She was our innocence. Donovan leaned closer to the camera. You took our innocence, Admiral. So we took the locks off the armory. You have 60 seconds to return the child, or we will demonstrate exactly why the universe should be grateful we decided to stay home. Corvan gritted his teeth. You are bluffing. Your crude weapons cannot pierce our hull. Open fire on the human flagship. The Vraxian dreadnought unleashed a volley of concentrated tachyon beams, strikes capable of glassing a continent. The beams struck the hull of Donovan's ship and dissipated instantly, absorbed by a localized magnetic singularity field generated by the human vessel. The sensor officer screamed, Admiral, their armor isn't metal. It's a collapsed matter lattice. It's absorbing our energy directly into their power grid. 60 seconds are up, Donovan said. The channel cut out. Down in the medical bay, Abigail finished her drawing. It was a picture of a massive, black, jagged ship tearing a crystalline spaceship in half. She put the crayon down, covered her ears with her small hands, and closed her eyes. The void of slip space erupted into a chaotic maelstrom of blinding kinetic violence. Admiral Corvan watched in absolute horror as the human dreadnoughts unloaded their arsenals. They did not use elegant energy weapons, precision tachyon lances, or the refined graviton beams favored by the civilized species of the Galactic arm. They used solid tungsten payloads, accelerated to near-light speeds by massive railguns originally built by the Deep Space Mining Division of General Dynamics and weaponized by DARPA's most classified black site engineers. The first volley struck the Vraxian escort cruiser, the luminous Sovereign, hovering loyally off the flagship's port bow. The crystalline shields, designed over centuries to gracefully refract and dissipate pure energy, were entirely useless against localized, unadulterated mass. The dense tungsten round shattered the shimmering barrier in a microsecond and ripped entirely through the 3-mile-long alien vessel. The cruiser violently decompressed, its elegant architecture disintegrating into a cloud of glowing debris that was instantly swallowed and crushed by the swirling dimensional tunnel. Panic, raw and unfiltered, gripped the pristine bridge of the flagship. The Vraxians had never engaged an enemy that weaponized sheer kinetic brutality. "Evasive maneuvers!" Corvan screamed, his usually vibrant obsidian scales turning a pale, sickly gray as he gripped the edge of his command console. "Divert all auxiliary power to the structural integrity fields. Launch the interceptor drones. Flood the corridor with defensive plasma." A swarm of thousands of automated fighters poured from the flagship's expansive launch bays, moving with synchronized hive mind precision controlled by the ship's quantum supercomputer. They darted toward the hulking black leviathans, firing continuous streams of superheated, concentrated plasma fire. The human ships simply ignored them. The plasma splashed harmlessly against the collapsed matter lattices of their hulls, a revolutionary heat-sink technology developed by the remnants of Lockheed Martin to absorb starfire. Aboard the lead human dreadnought, the Goliath, Commander Harrison Cross stood silently in the pressurized drop bay. He was encased in a mechanized combat suit developed jointly by Boston Dynamics and the Global Defense Coalition. It was an 8-foot-tall exoskeleton of reactive armor plating, heavily integrated munitions, and servo motors capable of crushing a titanium beam. Cross checked the power cell on his magnetic rotary rifle, the heavy weapon clicking satisfyingly into place. He looked around the bay at his squad. 50 men and women, the Hell Jumpers, entirely sealed in black armor, their visors glowing a menacing crimson in the dim red tactical lighting. "Listen up, Hell Jumpers!" Cross barked over the encrypted internal comms, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a seasoned veteran who had finally been let off the leash. "We are not here to take prisoners. We are not here to negotiate a treaty. We are here for the kid. The Vraxians wanted to see what humanity looks like when we stop hiding in the shadows and pretending to be dead. Let's show them why the dark is ours." The heavy drop bay doors slid open, immediately revealing the swirling, violet vortex of the slipspace tunnel and the massive crystalline hull of the Obsidian Pride looming dangerously close below. The human boarding pods were not designed for gentle, diplomatic docking. They were essentially hollowed-out, heavily armored bunker-buster missiles. Cross stepped into his pod, the thick restraining harness locking over his chest with a heavy metallic clank. "Launch," he ordered coldly. Hundreds of matte black pods shot from the underbellies of the human fleet, propelled by violent solid fuel rockets. They crossed the treacherous void of the dimensional corridor in mere seconds, slamming violently into the side of the Vraxian flagship with enough raw kinetic force to permanently shatter the internal bulkheads. On the Vraxian bridge, the impact alarms wailed like dying animals. The elegant lighting flickered and died, replaced by harsh emergency strobes. "Hull breach!" the tactical officer shrieked, his hands dancing frantically across the cracked holographic interfaces. "Decks 4 through 12 have been fully penetrated. Sir, we have unauthorized biological entities inside the ship. They are moving with impossible speed." Corvan gritted his razor-sharp teeth. "Seal the bulkheads immediately. Flood the breached decks with neurotoxin. Let these primitive beasts choke on their own hubris." But the human armor was fully environmentally sealed, carrying its own internal atmosphere and advanced filtration systems. The deadly green neurotoxin washed over the advancing Helljumpers without the slightest effect. Cross violently kicked the door of his pod open, his mechanized boot badly denting the pristine, mirror-like metallic floor of the alien corridor. Vraxian guards flooded the hallway from both sides, raising their elegant plasma rifles, shouting commands in their native tongue. Cross didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. He raised his heavy magnetic rifle and unleashed an unrelenting storm of depleted uranium rounds. The deafening, thunderous roar of the crude human weapon echoed through the pristine halls, a sound of pure mechanical hatred. The Vraxian guards, accustomed to honorable duels and clean energy burns, were literally torn apart. The heavy munitions punched through their crystalline armor like wet paper, painting the flawless white walls with bright, luminescent blue blood. The Helljumpers moved with terrifying, practiced efficiency. They did not shout battle cries. They did not break formation. They communicated entirely through silent tactical telemetry, advancing like a mechanized wave of inevitable death. They cleared room after room, hallway after hallway, in a brutal, systematic display of close-quarters slaughter that the Vraxians had no tactical doctrine to counter. Down in the ship's high-security medical bay, Chief Scientist Vorath watched the internal security feeds in absolute, paralyzing terror. The humans were not fighting a strategic war. They were conducting an extermination. He looked down at the little human girl, Abigail, who was still sitting calmly on the floor of her transparent energy cell. She was humming a soft, rhythmic melody, completely unfazed by the distant, thunderous explosions violently shaking the massive ship. Vorath grabbed a heavy plasma pistol from a wall rack and pointed it directly at the glass cell, his hands trembling violently. "Stop them!" he screamed at the child, his brilliant mind finally snapping under the overwhelming pressure of imminent death. "Tell them to stop this madness, or I will incinerate you where you stand." Abigail stopped humming. She slowly looked up at the towering alien, her bright blue eyes entirely devoid of fear. "You should run away now," she said softly. Before Vorath could register her words, the reinforced doors of the medical bay exploded inward, a massive directional-shaped charge blowing the heavy metal completely off its hinges. The resulting shockwave knocked Vorath violently to the ground, scattering his medical instruments across the floor. Through the thick, acrid smoke, a massive black-armored figure slowly stepped into the room. It was Commander Cross. His armor was deeply scarred, smoking, and heavily coated in luminescent blue blood. He raised his weapon and fired a single, precise round, completely obliterating the plasma pistol in Vorath's hand, and taking 3 of the alien's slender fingers with it. Vorath screamed in agony, clutching his ruined appendage, rolling on the floor. Cross didn't even look down at the writhing alien scientist. He walked deliberately over to the containment cell. With one massive mechanized punch, he entirely shattered the complex energy emitter powering the cage. The shimmering glass dissolved into nothingness. Cross knelt down, his massive suit hissing loudly as it vented excess heat into the room. The heavy, intimidating faceplate mechanically slid back, revealing a rugged, deeply scarred human face. He offered the child a gentle, reassuring smile. "Hey there, Abby," Cross said, his rough voice surprisingly soft and warm. "General Donovan sent me to bring you home. Are you ready to go?" Abigail smiled back brightly, picking up her black crayon and clutching it tightly. "Yes, Mr. Cross. Did you bring the really big ships like you promised?" Cross chuckled deeply, reaching out and gently lifting her onto his massive, heavily armored shoulder. "We sure did, kiddo. We brought all of them." He tapped his helmet's communications relay. "Command, this is Cross. We have the package securely. She is safe and unharmed. Proceed immediately to Phase 2. On the bridge of the Goliath, General Matthew Donovan received the secure confirmation. He exhaled a long breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The anchor was safe. The cage was fully open. He turned to his chief tactical officer. "Target their primary singularity core," Donovan ordered, his voice cold as ice. "Give them a warning shot, right through the main engine block." A massive, hyperdense railgun slug tore effortlessly through the rear armor of the Obsidian Pride, crippling the massive dreadnought's dimensional drive and violently ripping it out of the slipspace tunnel. The shattered Vraxian flagship tumbled uncontrollably back into normal space, floating dead and powerless in the dark, silent void, bleeding precious oxygen and glowing plasma into the vacuum. The fleet of Leviathans gracefully exited the slipspace tower mere moments later, perfectly surrounding the crippled alien flagship in a suffocating sphere of overwhelming firepower. General Donovan authorized a wide-band hyperwave transmission, forcefully overriding the Vraxian security protocols and projecting his face directly onto the main screen of the ruined Vraxian bridge. Admiral Corvan was bleeding heavily from a deep, jagged gash on his forehead, looking around helplessly at the smoldering ruins of his once proud command center. The bodies of his elite bridge crew lay scattered across the consoles. "Admiral Corvan," Donovan said, his stern voice echoing through the ruined bridge like the inevitable tolling of a funeral bell. "Your Vanguard boarding party took exactly 14 seconds to kill my men in Cheyenne Mountain. We boarded and took your flagship in exactly 8 minutes. This was never a battle. This was a demonstration." "You are monsters," Corvan whispered hoarsely, coughing up thick blue blood. "You are reckless savages playing with forces you cannot possibly comprehend. The Vraxian Emperor rules 1,000 worlds with an iron fist. When he learns of this unprovoked atrocity, the entire Grand Armada will descend upon your insignificant, ruined mud ball and burn it to radioactive ash." Donovan leaned forward, staring directly into the camera lens, his eyes burning with an ancient, suppressed fury. "That is exactly what we are counting on, Admiral. You see, we didn't just build these deep space ships to defend Earth's orbit. We built them in the dark to ensure that no one in this galaxy would ever dare threaten our home again. We traced your unique slip-space trajectory during our pursuit. We have successfully extracted the exact coordinates to your core worlds from your nav computer." Corvan's reptilian eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated panic. "No, that is structurally impossible. You cannot safely navigate the deep cosmic currents without a Vraxian beacon." Donovan's expression remained terrifyingly stoic. "We don't need to navigate the currents, Admiral. We just need to push the water." The general turned slightly, signaling his helmsman with a sharp nod. "Sink the singularity drives across the entire fleet. Target the Vraxian capital world, Vrax Prime. Overload the mass shadow generators." The human fleet did not spin up their drives to enter a slipspace corridor. Instead, they weaponized their experimental hyperdrives in a way no sane species had ever attempted. 13 massive leviathans perfectly synchronized their singularity engines, intentionally creating an artificial gravity well so immensely dense that it actively bent and fractured the very fabric of reality itself. They fired a highly compressed, weaponized gravitational shockwave directly through the subspace dimensional layers. The invisible shockwave traveled at over 10,000 times the speed of light, a silent, unstoppable tsunami of distorted physics and localized gravity. It struck the heavily fortified Vraxian core world exactly 4 minutes later. The legendary planetary defense grid of Vrax Prime, designed over millennia to withstand coordinated orbital bombardments from entire armadas, did not even register the spatial anomaly before it hit. The gravitational wave slammed violently into the planet's atmosphere, instantly compressing and igniting the oxygen. Massive, stable tectonic plates violently cracked and shattered under the impossible, sudden pressure. The sprawling oceans instantly boiled into steam. The majestic, towering, crystalline cities of the Ascendancy, hubs of galactic culture and power, crumbled into microscopic dust in mere seconds. It was not a military battle. It was a complete clinical planetary execution. Back in the cold void of space, Donovan stood silently on his bridge, watching the complex telemetry data coldly confirm the absolute destruction of the Vraxian military and political infrastructure. "Admiral Corvan," Donovan said smoothly, watching the broken, defeated alien commander stare at the incoming casualty data in absolute, mind-shattering horror. "Your grand empire has just lost its capital world, its primary shipyards, and its central military command. You are no longer an empire. You are a scattered, broken remnant. Corvan fell to his knees on the ruined, bloody deck of his bridge. "Why?" he choked out, hot tears of thick blue fluid streaming continuously down his scaly face. "Why did you destroy everything? We only took one human child. You are a species of unhinged psychopaths." "No," Donovan replied calmly, adjusting his uniform. "We are a species of survivors. We spent a century desperately learning how to control our darkest impulses, how to permanently bury the terrifying monsters we created during our own global wars. We wanted to be peaceful. We wanted to be left alone in the dark to rebuild our home. But you arrogantly knocked on our door, Admiral. You violently broke into our home. And you took the one thing that mathematically proved we still had a soul." Donovan took a slow, deep breath, looking out at the stars. "We did this because we wanted to send a definitive message to every other empire, trading conglomerate, and Grand Armada watching the stars. We are not prey." Donovan abruptly cut the transmission, plunging the Vraxian bridge into silence, and stood up tall. "The message is simple," Donovan murmured quietly to himself, looking out the viewport at the dead Vraxian ship. "Leave humanity alone." Deep in the bowels of the ship, Commander Cross's heavily scorched boarding pod slammed back into the drop bay of the Goliath. The heavy blast doors hissed open, and the massive mechanized marine stepped out, gently carrying the small 6-year-old girl. Rushing medical personnel immediately stepped forward with stretchers and diagnostic gear, but Abigail politely waved them away. She looked around the massive, dark industrial hangar, filled with terrifying weapons of war and giant soldiers clad in heavily scarred black armor. She didn't look afraid of them. She just looked tired. General Donovan slowly walked down into the bustling bay, his stern, weathered face finally breaking into a small, genuinely warm smile. He knelt down on one knee in front of her, ignoring the military protocols. "Hello, Abigail," he said softly, examining her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her bright eyes shining. "No, General Matt. The lizard men were very mean to me, but Mr. Cross saved me." Donovan nodded firmly, placing a gentle hand on her small shoulder. "Yes, he did. It's time to go home now." As the massive human fleet slowly turned back toward Earth, leaving the burning, dead wreckage of the Vraxian ascendancy drifting behind in the cold void, the wider galaxy fell into a terrified, deafening silence. The legendary monsters of Earth had finally woken up from their slumber, and they had brutally proven to the entire universe that they were still the apex predators of the cosmos. If this tale of humanity's unyielding wrath and ultimate vengeance sent shivers down your spine, please do not forget to hit that like button, share this video with fellow science fiction fans, and subscribe to the channel for more epic stories. Your support helps us bring the greatest galactic dramas and thrilling cosmic adventures right to your screen. Drop a comment below telling us what you think the galaxy will do next. Stay safe out there, and remember our power.